Good evening. Can you hear? Tracy, yeah? All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to what I think is going to be a spectacular night. My name is Jennifer Jones. I'm the president of the Toronto Public Library Foundation, and I am beyond delighted. Oh, thank you. Of all the applause for people, I was not expecting it to be for me. We have some incredible people who are joining us tonight to bring a story that is really powerful to you. First of all, I'd like to take a moment to recognize that Toronto Reference Library is on Indigenous land. This is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, also known as the Six Nations Confederacy, the Wendat and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. Toronto Public Library gratefully acknowledges these Indigenous nations for their guardianship of this land. We'd also like to remind and reaffirm as Torontonians and Canadians our responsibility to these Indigenous nations and to all Indigenous peoples and communities living in Toronto. This land is also part of the Dish with One Spoon territory that includes a treaty between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, also known as the Six Nations Confederacy, the Anishinaabe allied nations, to peaceably share and care for this land, its waters, and all of the biodiversity in the Great Lakes region. All those who come to live and work here are responsible for honoring this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention that this is September 11th. And I'm sure, like a lot of you, I woke up with a heavy heart this morning remembering that day. However, it also means that we should take even more pleasure and pride of coming together in a safe space in this great city tonight. As the president of the foundation, there's a lot of things about my role that I'm privileged to do. One of them is make my weekly calls to thank donors for their recent gift. And on these calls, I have the opportunity to hear firsthand why you support the library and why you think it's such an important institution in our city. The other thing I love is our event tonight. It's such a treat to be able to bring together library lovers and say with great gratitude how much I appreciate, my whole team appreciates, the library appreciates the support that you give us so that TPL can continue to innovate and deliver the great services it does across the city. If you believe that everybody, no matter their circumstances, deserves a safe and free place to share, learn, and grow, then you're library lovers and you're library people. You are library people, and we, together, are library people. Your donations help the library fund innovative programs across the city, services, spaces, and take some risks that it wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Thank you. The film we're going to watch together will give you even more insight about the essential work the library plays in the social fabric of our city. I've seen the movie thanks to the generosity of Mr. Emilio Estevez, who you'll be meeting shortly, and I left with an incredible impression of the story that it tells. And I'm not the only one. Allow me to share this note that came in yesterday with an online donation. I saw the movie The Public at TIFF, and it just reminded me how we all need to support libraries who are at the front line of so many challenges our cities face. When I moved to Canada well over a decade ago, one of the first things we did was get a library card. So thank you, Emilio, for creating this powerful story and bringing it to the Toronto Public Library for all of our donors to share together tonight. Thank you. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Vickery Bowles, our city librarian.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And hello, everyone. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here this evening to welcome all of our donors and supporters to the Bram and Bluma Appel Salon here at the Toronto Public Library. Tonight is such an incredibly special night because, of course, we're hosting this wonderful private donor screening of the film The Public, written, directed, and starring Emilio Estevez. I had the privilege, like Jennifer, of being in the audience at the gala screening a couple of nights ago, and I can tell you firsthand this is a gripping, emotional, funny, and incredibly honest film that tells the real challenges that libraries and librarians and indeed all of us face in today's world. Now, I'm not going to give absolutely anything away, But at the core of the movie is the topic of homelessness and mental health, and how public spaces and public institutions such as libraries work with and help support these communities. And this has become an ever-growing need here in Toronto, as we all know. And we have some very specific services in place here at the library to improve the lives of vulnerable persons. Our branches are warming and cooling centers during extreme weather alerts and a safe, welcoming place of refuge. Through our Bookmobile Shelter Outreach Program, we visit family shelters and give children story times and advice to parents. And we have community librarians embedded in agencies serving vulnerable and marginalized people across the city, such as the Toronto South and Toronto East Detention Centres, Toronto Employment and Social Services. And this fall, we have a librarian embedded in 2 city-run shelters, helping us better serve the needs of those experiencing homelessness right where they're living. And this initiative moves librarians out of their traditional role. Thank you. And directly into the communities where they can work along agency staff and actually becoming one of the team members with them. And a new initiative here we have at TPL is that we recently hired a full-time social worker to provide system-wide support to better serve the needs of vulnerable populations. Rama Hashi, who is here with us this evening, will focus on helping us better serve the needs of vulnerable populations, enhancing our role in the community, developing partnerships with other community agencies, and identifying opportunities to remove barriers and increase access to library services for everyone, trying to make sure that no one gets left behind. But to understand how we're actually making a difference in the lives of so many people, I think the best way of explaining that is to tell you a very short story. One of our staff a while ago at our Lillian H. Smith branch met Jeffrey, an older man who walked with a cane and had a heavy speech impediment. And his request for us was simple. He needed help looking for a Santa hat to purchase for his husband, Michael, who was dying of AIDS. Jeffrey was searching for a very specific hat since Christmas was always very special for him and for Michael. And sadly, he wasn't sure whether Michael would actually make it to Christmas. Jeffrey had a limited income receiving ODSP supports, but had some money set aside. He didn't have a credit card and he wasn't able to travel because of his physical limitations. So he shared with the librarian that he had difficulties with his housing situation and had struggled with homelessness on and off for about 5 years. The branch staff member worked very hard to assist Jeffrey. She was absolutely determined to help him find this special gift, and after a long search, she found exactly what he wanted and even offered to pick up the item for him. The next day, Jeffrey came in to pick up the hat and was absolutely overjoyed, as you can imagine. He called this library staffer his personal angel and dropped off a lovely card that he and Michael both signed, expressing their deepest gratitude. Due to his health conditions and speech impediment, Jeffrey explained that he was quite accustomed to being shunned and disregarded. But he always felt welcome in the library, and he appreciated it so much. He sensed that the staff truly wanted to help him, and he wanted to help others in the same way. So as a result, the team at the branch worked with Jeffrey to apply for a scholarship to attend the annual conference of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, and he was accepted with a full scholarship. When Jeffrey learned the news, you can imagine he was absolutely over the moon. A week later, this particular staff member came into work and found an envelope on her desk, and inside was a Toronto Blue Jays baseball cap, a gift from Jeffrey to his angel with one simple sentiment: Merry Christmas. So I think it goes without saying that all our staff are absolutely committed to helping vulnerable persons in any possible way they can, and making a real difference in the lives of Torontonians, no matter where they live, what their background is, and what they have to offer. And donors like all of you do make a tremendous impact on the work we are able to do here at the library. So I just want you to know how much we appreciate all that you do in supporting us and in believing in the work that we do here in Toronto. So on that note, I want to move to the next part of our program and introduce our host for the evening. Many of you know him as an incredibly popular TV and radio host, but here at TPL, he is family. He grew up going to the Albion Library, still visits his local downtown branch, and I'm told he still carries his Toronto Public Library card wherever he goes. He is Toronto Public Library's friend and outspoken champion. Please join me in welcoming George Stroumboulopoulos.
I hope I have it. I do have it here. I do have it on me. There we go. That would be horrible if I didn't have it. I'm thrilled to be with you today. It's true, actually, I am technically family. My mother couldn't afford a babysitter when I was raised, so she would drop me off inside the doors of the Albion Library and just ask the librarians not to let me leave. This is true, and I stayed there for many, many days as a child. And I saw movies I was too young to watch. I listened to records I was too, much to my mother's chagrin. I read books, but really what I learned was community, and that's it. So we have a big fight ahead of us, as we know, politically and socially and culturally. And luckily, you're all here because you believe in this as well, and we're all here because we have a fight in us. So I'm really looking forward to it. This film is really exciting. I saw it a couple of days ago. I'm a big fan of Emilio. I like what he does. His film, The Way, really moved me, certainly. But when I heard he was doing a movie that involved this conversation, I was particularly excited because no one's really tackling this stuff in a way that I know that Emilio can, with that sort of humanity. And I think you're going to be really, really pleased with the film that you watch tonight. So if it's okay with you, I thought we would talk for a little while beforehand. Probably about half an hour, we'll have a little conversation, not just with Emilio, but somebody who knows an awful lot about this subject, and his name is Ryan Dowd. Let's bring Ryan up first. Ryan is the executive director of a very large homeless shelter in Illinois. Good to see you, sir. How's you, man? How long have you been working in this particular facility?
So I started volunteering there when I was 13.
Yeah.
Started working there when I was 21. Became executive director when I was 26.
Right.
So
He's 29 now. So
3 years.
3 years. That's how we've done. So this is let's bring Emilio up so you can answer this question in front of him. Please welcome. You know who Emilio Estevez is, clearly as an actor and such, and a writer and a director. He's a great storyteller and a real humanist. Come on up, Emilio Estevez. Man,
thank you.
You must be so sick of library jokes by now.
Well, you know, I never get sick of library jokes. No. In fact, you know, I was in a movie that took place in the library about 32 years ago. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
You may have heard of it.
I have. Yeah. I watched it in detention. So there you go.
There it is.
You know, why did you don't just do projects. If you look at your filmography, you take a long time in between projects. Right. So what was it about this one that really connected with you?
Well, it's not always by choice, just so you know. But I choose subjects and stories that I know are going to be a tough road. I know what I'm getting into. For instance, when I made a film called Bobby, which was about the day Bobby Kennedy was assassinated at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, I knew that was a tough story. But you know, I hung in there. It took me about 7 years to make. I knew The Way was going to be a tough story. You're telling a story about a pilgrimage across the north of Spain, and you try to pitch that story in Hollywood, and you see the eyes glaze over of the executives, and the same thing with this.
Oh, I get it. Man, libraries and homeless.
Right, homelessness, libraries, and mental illness, and it's going to be really sexy.
Right.
And it's like, next, please, get out.
Right.
So. But, you know, I really appreciated the value in telling the story, and anything I feel that's difficult is of value, and so I hung in there, and this has been an 11-year journey to get this picture made.
11 years.
Yeah, almost 12.
How much does the script change?
So when I started, so it was inspired by an article, it was an essay in the LA Times, and this was 2007, April 1st. Right, so I read this article. I was moved. I was touched. I was inspired by it, and I was looking for a follow-up picture to Bobby, a story, and I wanted to do something that was similar, in that it was a singular location, that it was an ensemble cast, something I could shoot very quickly and cheaply. And again, in the world of independent film, you have to think like that. You have to put your producer's cap on and say, okay, I know the story is going to be difficult to tell and difficult to raise money for, so how am I going to tell this in an economical way? So so I started to do the research on this. Read the article, was very moved, went back down to the LA Public Library, the downtown branch, and because I'd done the bulk of my research for Bobby there, and it was exactly as I had remembered it.
Right.
And the article was about how libraries have become de facto homeless shelters, and how librarians have become first responders.
Right. You know, Ryan, when you're gonna, like, first of all, how did you get connected to Emilio?
I got a Facebook friend request out of the blue one day.
From him?
From him.
And then I think he hit limp delete. He was just like, nah.
No, I actually typed out a really nasty response because I thought it was my buddy Dave. And then I thought, well, let me check, and I realized that the account had actually been around for a little while, so then I deleted everything I had just written and wrote a much nicer thing. And then it just kind of went from there. I had written my book, the American Library Association book, The Librarian's Guide to Homelessness, and somehow, it wasn't even out yet, somehow he found out about it and thought,
someone had tipped me off and said, you've got to know about this guy, you've got to know about this book. And I just thought that there was definitely some connection there.
So how, as a person who works in this space for a long time, how nervous are you watching this movie? Because frankly, most of the time, people try to tell the story of homelessness in some way in a big film, and they get it wrong.
Almost always get it wrong, and I was
You were
really nervous because I really, really wanted to like him. You know, and like, what if he botched it? What if he took this beautiful issue that I care so deeply about and he just got it wrong, as almost every movie does? Because most movies, they take one of two errors. They either, it's every stereotype. Let's talk about mental illness and alcoholism and all these things, and let's just kind of brand homeless people as this kind of singular stereotype, right? Or they take the exact opposite side and take the noble poor, where no homeless person has ever made a bad decision in their lives, and they've never done anything wrong, and they're perfect and flawless and happy all the time. And neither of those is real. You know, homeless people are people. And there's some beauty there, and there's some sadness there, and there's some anger there, and there's sometimes some violence there, and there's some madness there sometimes. It's all there. And so going into the movie, I was like, please don't botch this. But he didn't. As you see this, please pay attention, just the humanity there, the multi-dimensionality there that is there in every human being, but somehow doesn't make it into film on homelessness. And I truly believe this is the first movie in decades that has gotten it right.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I agree.
But I was still terrified.
Were you?
Well, when we were taking the film down to the ALA convention in New Orleans this past June, Ryan and I began to talk, and I said, you know what, I really need him. I really needed him to be there just to have somebody to lean on. And after the first screening, I think that we felt pretty good. Once we got past the librarian saying you did okay.
Yeah.
You didn't stereotypic. There was no stereotypes in this. It was all very accurate.
I look forward to the time when we're all having this conversation in a police station, in a mayor's office as well, because I think those are the organizations that probably need to get on board with this as well.
Right.
You paint a really honest picture of the reality of what it's like. I mean, when you write A Librarian's Guide to Homelessness, it's not just here's an idea. You identified a need.
Yeah, no, it's that idea that you know, libraries have become first responders, and there's all these issues, social issues, big social issues that libraries and librarians have to address, but don't have, or not trained for it, or not equipped for it. They don't teach this stuff in library school. And so, like, please, you know, learn how to use Narcan and revive people from an opioid addiction, and, oh, by the way, mental illness, and all these things, and let's, you know, oh, and by the way, you also have to take care of the books and the computers and run programs, and they're just woefully ill-equipped. And so it's been fun for me personally to kind of get in there and say, okay, here's what we do in the homeless shelters. So you guys, since you're going to be the de facto homeless shelters, you better learn some of the tools. And so,
and that was, in fact, the title of the piece that Chip Ward, the Salt Lake City librarian that inspired the piece, that was what they didn't teach us in library school. So to Ryan's point.
What did you know, because I know you're feverish with your research, what did you learn at the end? Like when you wrapped on the final day?
So here's what I finally got, and it took a while being told to go away by the desk reference librarians, but that sacred space, which is, it is the same on par with doctor-patient, lawyer-client. That sacred space between patron and librarian is you're in that sort of that amazing spot where whatever whatever's existing between Patron and Librarian is, man, it's like, so I would be there trying to listen in, and they'd be like, no, go away.
Really?
Go away. Yeah, step back. Yeah, we don't want you. Yeah, this is not your business.
Move away, Estevez.
Yeah, that's
You're
right.
not welcome here.
That's right.
Well, there's some key scene. There's a very key scene in this film where that even comes up.
That's right.
So what do you think that means, though? Why is that space so important? I mean, it is a public space, and in this era, we have given up privacy in the public space. Why do you think that's so important in a library?
It's the patron's right to privacy. And we even talk about it in the film, The Connecticut Four, which all of you, I'm sure, are familiar with, this group of librarians who pushed back against the FBI, who were curious about who was checking out what books and trying to cultivate that information for purposes of getting data on that person. So yeah, it is that very private space that is sacred.
I mean, you watched your old man get arrested a lot.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, my father was arrested, and that really informed sort of where I land socially. But he was arrested 68 times.
But for social activism.
So all social activism.
Yeah.
It was for anti-nuclear proliferation, homelessness, and immigration. And thank God we've solved all those issues. But here's what's interesting, and is that when he was getting arrested, it would often make the nightly news, local and sometimes national. And I would sit there and I'd watch on television with my mom, to our horror, my father getting carted off in cuffs, thrown into the back of a police car, and oftentimes screaming the Lord's Prayer. So he looked even crazier. And I understood it fundamentally. I understood the action. I understood the civil disobedience of it. I didn't understand the spiritual until much, much later. And then it landed.
This is it, right? This is a link that needs to be made with a group of people who think that religion is separate from these social justice issues. The spirituality is an enormous reason why your father does what he does, and that informs who you become, right?
Right. Well, it's that great Sartre quote where I don't fight fascism because I think I will win. I fight fascists because they are fascists. And that was at the core of my dad's resistance.
One of my favorite characters in this film, it turns out your mother had a role in finding.
That's right. That's right.
There's one character is played by an excellent rapper called Rhyme Fest.
That's right.
Whose name is Che, for obvious reasons. He's incredible in this film.
Yeah.
And how'd you get him?
So my mom called me one night and she says, hey, I just saw this wonderful documentary called In My Father's House. It's a rapper named Rhyme Fest or Rhyme something. She didn't get it right, but she says...
he beefs with Kanye. Yeah.
Right? So she says, it's called In My Father's House, and this guy, his father was on the street for 20 years, and the only place his dad was comfortable meeting his son after being estranged for so long was in the public library. And the documentary follows that, and they're back together. They have a relationship now, and this was and so I called Che, and I said, hey, I saw your documentary. You're a wonderful character, and you seem like you got a ton of integrity. Read the script. Do you think you can act? And he read it within a day and said, I'm in. I want to do this.
That's amazing. Yeah. What do we do now? What do they do now?
As a library or as a people?
As a people. Because after seeing The Way, I mean, as I understand it, tens of thousands, like thousands and thousands of people went on this journey because they saw it in your film.
That's right.
If half the people did that after seeing this film, we could see some real change.
That's right. Well, we continue to get letters from people who have been inspired to get off their couch and walk 800 kilometers. Yeah. And I'm tens of thousands. And in fact, there was an article in the New York Times about how the uptick in people traveling to Camino has improved the economy of the north of Spain, the tourism. So, and it's a title that continues to be evergreen. So I'm very proud of the film, and if there could be some part of that translates to this film, that we inspire people to look at homelessness, to look at mental illness differently, to look at libraries differently, and participate.
Easier said than done?
4 answers for you.
Please give them.
So first, accept that we actually can end homelessness. We have this notion somehow that it must be there, it's always been. It has not always been there. I don't know about Canada, but in the United States, In the United States, we've only really had homelessness since the 80s. I suspect Canada is similar. It's a relatively new phenomenon, what we're experiencing now. This has not always been there. If it's taken 40 years to create this, we can uncreate this in 40 years. Absolutely. So first that. Reject the notion. Second is reject the notion that we can't or won't do anything, and that we as a society, like just kind of dismiss that. Third thing is go out and build some relationships. The revolution is in the relationship. You have to actually interact with people. You can't just kind of from afar be an activist. If you're not there on the ground having some sort of human interaction, it just doesn't work. And then the fourth thing is let's do something. Volunteer, donate, call your legislator, write your legislator, do something after this. And it doesn't have to, to your analogy, I'll let you give your analogy, but we don't all have to save 100% of the world today. But we got to do something, and we got to try.
There's a spectrum of homelessness too, right? That an alarming number are people who are temporarily homeless, and there's also another myth that's out there quite a bit, which is that everybody's one paycheck away from being homeless. That's a myth.
It is.
Right? This is about people who exist without a social safety, without a safety net at all. And if we don't act like the safety net, then nothing will change. Do you like making films like this, films that are about something?
I make folk films. I make movies about people. And that started with a film that I did in 1995 called The War at Home. And I directed and produced it and starred. I played a young man home from Vietnam, suffering from PTSD. And then followed it up with Bobby and The Way. And so yeah, I like to say I make folk films. Make movies about people that celebrate our humanity.
But also that kind of put a mirror back to society, because none of these people that you make films about exist in a vacuum. It's often a reflection of what's happening around them.
Right. So I don't, and some people say, well, I've stumbled into this too, because again, if you look at the length of time that it's taken to make this film, 11 years ago, I don't think it would have been as relevant as it is now.
No. Right. It would have been a different ending too, wouldn't it?
It would have been, yeah. It was a much more diabolical ending. Yeah.
Did you have a diabolical, not to say that this doesn't have a hairy ending, we don't want to spoil it for you.
No, this film celebrates civil disobedience and social justice, and the only thing we weaponize is literature.
The actors getting...
It's really, you'll see.
There's another really cool thing too, and is that if you'll notice all the placards and the flags hanging in the libraries, you put them there?
That's right.
And they remain there?
They are still there. Yeah, the Cincinnati Public Library has kept those up, and yeah, they're still there. It's
I
great.
think a lot of you like this. There's almost no wasted scene in this movie, that in every shot there are 4 or 5 little Easter eggs of knowledge, little quotes, little books being left everywhere. How much work did that take to put all that in?
That was the feat of the production designer, and he just sort of went bananas and just did his thing. And there is an Easter egg. There is a Breakfast Club reference. And you have to look closely to it. There's a moment where we see a librarian reading to a bunch of kids, children's story hour, and she's reading Ali Sheedy's book, She Was Nice to Mice, which Ali wrote when she was, I think, 11 years old. She was published.
That would
so
be
that's
fun.
Yeah. You have to lean in and see it, but yeah, it's there.
The cast, Jeffrey Wright is incredible in this.
Indeed.
Was it easy to get people to want to play along with the script?
I was kind of surprised. I mean, again, these are people who are committed socially, certainly talented, and very busy. And we shot the film in 22 days. So it was, that's a lot of juggling to do with a lot of schedules. Alec Baldwin would fly in for a day and then go back to New York to be with his 9 kids. I don't know how many he's got. So it's 4, actually. But he told me a funny story. He said when his wife just was leaving the hospital, just earlier this year when they had their 4th kid, his wife says to the library staff, "See you soon." He said, "No."
So you have Alec Baldwin, Jeffrey Wright, obviously you're in it. Michael Kenneth Williams, who's one of my favorites from The Wire and Boardwalk Empire.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And
Jenna Malone, Taylor Schilling.
Taylor Schilling is
from Orange is the New Black. Gabrielle Union.
Yep.
Christian Slater, who this is our 3rd film working together.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So when you sent it out, everybody just came back with "Let's do this"?
Well, at that point, once offers were made to actors and start dates were in place, it's a lot easier to get actors to say yes, as opposed to some sort of nebulous sort of, well, we're going to make this at some point in the future. Agents don't necessarily want to take projects that are not totally set up to their clients, unless, and if there's some money attached to it. And of course, with independent film, you are always out there scraping pennies together to get your film made. So it wasn't like I was offering a tremendous amount of money for these actors to join, but I think they saw the value in the story, and sort of it becomes sort of a mob mentality. It's like, oh, he's in, I'm in. Oh, they're in, I'm in. Yeah.
Right. Do you think the political climate in the United States contributed to their willingness to participate in a film with social value?
I think that has something to do with it, I would say, yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your guys' time today. Congratulations on this film.
Thank you.
Ryan Dowd and Emilio Estevez.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, and you should probably introduce your movie.
Yeah, so you're about to see the public.
11 years of work to get this done.
That's right, that's right.
Did it almost not get financed?
Oh, a lot of times. So
Yeah.
we were up and we were scheduled to make this film in 2008, and then the economic crisis, right? So yeah.
The public.
Thank you.